Thank you. Hello, thank you for choosing to come to this session. I'm from the University of Huddersfield and I am a subject librarian for the School of Arts and Humanities, particularly focusing on the art subjects. So my talk has quite an art and design leaning to it. So my opening provocation is the idea that you do not get this experience with a print book. Let me work out how to play my videos. So we've got two different items from our collection here. A book that's actually designed with a cover that encourages you to run your finger up and down it to create sound. And the other book is a anthology of advertising that is actually designed like a big pencil case and you have to unzip it. So you do not get these sensory, tangible, like material experiences in an ebook. Move my slides on. And why is this important? So going to look at kind of information literacy practices in the context of art and design pedagogies. There's been some quite interesting work around this over the years. So a paper by Appleton et al. Based on some research at the University of Arts London around the idea that information literacy in art and design does need to be different. And now this isn't about learning styles, but about accounting for the fact that the subject is different. And then there's also this work by Shreve et al. Around how art and design pedagogies do have distinctive characteristics which set them apart from other disciplines. And maybe some of you know, whatever subjects, if you are involved in kind of subject support in the library, maybe you can think of different characteristics that perhaps make science or medicine or history a different kind of information literacy practice as well. So Shreve et al. Set out these 7 key characteristics of art and design pedagogies. So learning should be material and physical in some of its dimensions. It's about living with uncertainty and the unknown. It's visible. It takes into account an audience. It's about developing independent creative practitioners. It is social, and process is such an important part of it. And I have really kind of embraced these pedagogical characteristics for art and design in my own work as a subject librarian who is heavily involved in teaching. So today I wanted to kind of explore how some of these pedagogical kind of characteristics actually kind of come to life and can kind of be really explored and engaged with through a print collection. And why print collections are something interesting to talk about in our increasingly digital first information landscape. If I was being quite provocative and controversial, I might even be as bold as to say that is a print book in a library now actually kind of becoming a bit of a marginalized form of information. You know, when I first started working in libraries over 15 years ago, it was all about print. Print collections were the foundation on which the library was built. And of course, our understanding and our conceptualizations of what a library is, they have shifted for various reasons. The COVID-19 pandemic, we can really see that as a turning point in library collection development policies, really pushed a lot of us towards this sudden question of how do we make things digital? People want digital. Budgetary pressures, I'm sure many of us in the room, you know, it's not a surprise that our spending power has, you know, really led to this decision of how can we use our evidence and our data to make decisions, changing collection development policies. In my institution, there has been a real shift from librarian stock selections to reading list materials. When I first started in this job a decade ago, I had my own individual budget for art and design. I no longer have that. And these debates about shifting student information practices, what do they want? How do they read? Do they even read? What are their study habits? So it is a complex landscape, and I don't want this presentation to be, so much a critique of my institution particularly, but really situating some of the ways that we have to work and the ways that we, have to do things in this bigger landscape that, is at times, constricting us, or we're trying to respond, to this rapidly shifting situation. So back in 2020, I came to a Northern Collaboration event, literally kind of the week before COVID changed everything. And I presented this theory about the danger of stagnating print collections. So I'd identified that at Huddersfield, people were adding things to reading lists based on what we already had in stock. The library was using that to drive its acquisitions policy. The library was mainly spending its money on extra copies and new editions for things on reading lists. And the book budget was not really being used to diversify and develop and enrich the collection. The collection wasn't growing to include newly published items. Now, I'd probably argue that this has changed because of our kind of digital first attitude, the real embracing of patron-driven acquisition, evidence-based acquisition, massive ebook packages, and being able to make more and more available. But what does that do for the growth of the print collections that my students need to be able to engage in those sensory, material, object-based learning experiences? And there is, of course, the argument that how can you make a reading list that suits the needs of, 70 architecture students that have all got their own unique and individual interests of what they want to do in their practice? How does a reading list help develop an art student into an independent creative practitioner? So sometimes the only way is print. So this academic year, I did some teaching with our first year BA architecture on the history and theory module. We were doing a comparative analysis of historic buildings. And in our kind of first tutorial sessions, my students were saying, I was looking at their work and I was like, where's your books? Where's your references? These are all websites. We can't have websites. That's not a valid source. And they were like, well, I tried searching the library and nothing came up for this building. I tried searching online and this was all I could find. And this is a really nice example about how this particular group of students, these first years, they did not have the skills to use a print book to think, okay, this building is an example of Baroque architecture. I'm going to go to the section of the library that's got loads of beautiful, massive books about Baroque architecture. And maybe if I look in the list of contents or use the index, I'll find that book in there. And that was kind of the base level of the work we were doing. Things weren't available as ebooks. Electronic access was really limited. And they had to go to those shelves. Otherwise, they were not going to pass this particular assignment. So I think that is a really nice example of how in some assessments, print is the only way. So what are the kind of problems and challenges we're facing at Huddersfield? I'm not going to talk through this whole slide, but, again, I think these are things that everybody across the sector can recognise. Financial pressures, changing how your purchasing policies have to be shaped. A big issue that's affected us has been library staffing cuts and academic staffing cuts. We have been through many rounds of redundancy, that has reduced my capacity to engage with the collections in the same way I used to, and my academics capacity to work with the library as well. Institutional aims, if your institution is all digital initiatives, AI, where does that leave those, you know, funny old-fashioned ways of working, you know, that, you know, paper and picking something up off a shelf? Declining student numbers in the arts, you know, I have to, you know, that's a real problem for me because it does not give me the same slice of the money compared to the courses that, you know, have got hundreds of students sitting in a lecture theatre. And we've got a particular problem with some of our library spaces as well. So I'm now going to talk, you know, so I'm just going to highlight this issue with the space. It's not you, Laura, it's the shelves that are the problem. And again, we're just constrained by the building, by the budgets, by the ability with what we can do with our space. So a lot of my books are in our rolling stacks, which strikes many art librarians with shock and horror, because how can students browse something where you have to move the shelves along and form a queue? That's really, really impacted my teaching in particular. We don't have an oversized section, hence why I've got a photo of a book that just lives on the floor. We are going to do something about that, but it's a work in progress. And like we were talking about in the workshop I was in before the break, yeah, you can implement change and you can do work to reconfigure your spaces, but you need to have the resource and the capacity to do that. And we also have a separation between our special collections and our archives team, which are they are part of academic services, but they're in a separate part of the building. So some of my books, other places have them locked away in a cupboard. I do not, because there's no alternative. And also a unique kind of thing about, you know, art and design, a lot of it is visual information. I challenge some of you, you know, if someone comes and says, I need some help with my keyword searching, I'm trying to find out about the color blue. That is a real question I've had, like, you know, or I need to research this image. It's difficult. And I think the shift towards AI, I'm seeing this with our Primo research assistant. If those really old print books on the shelves have never existed in a digital way, that's creating a data gap in how our students' information behaviours are shaped by the systems we're using. But we have tried, you know, investing in Bloomsbury Digital Resources. Oh, I love that platform. That is like my favourite way to do ebooks. Brilliant. So some of the strategies and interventions that I've specifically kind of experimented with, some more success than others, to try and open up this world of print collections and get students in the library and using them. So something I always do in my library inductions is try and find stories to tell about the personal libraries of artists and architects. Now, this began because I went to an art libraries conference in Dublin, and we went to a museum where they have a recreation of Francis Bacon's actual studio. And when I looked at it, I went, that's full of books. This studio is just full of books. And this is where this way of doing my inductions kind of begins from. And so I just try and use this as a hook for my students. Look, these people that are real seminal big names in your subject area, they have really interesting libraries. You need to start building yours. My teaching, my library inductions, teaching sessions, benefit of having small cohorts is that they can fit in my little library teaching space. And my academics are always very willing and very keen to get students in the library. So this is what a very typical library induction that I do looks like. Just get as many books out as possible. And what, again, I find fascinating is start talking to the students, and a lot of them will say, I've never seen books like this. this library is not boring like I thought it was going to be. When you say library, I think like reading loads of dry text. This is actually really interesting. So even if it's not like a library session that I'm involved in, I still offer out our space to my academics. So our costume illustration module come in and they actually use the library throughout the year to, you know, do their illustration work. My library inductions particularly quite often have also involved these creative interventions. So again, you know, art and design students, we are expecting them to work throughout their degree in creative ways. So activities like drawing. I've not actually done the zine making yet, but one thing I would love to do is have more time with a group of students and get them to, I don't know, maybe like make a zine of like their surprise highlights of what they found in the collection or cool things that exist in the art, you know, in the fashion section or the architecture section. As a way of engaging them with those collections. We tried some book spine poetry. It was all right. It didn't really work. I tried to like gamify it and make them like little cards. So they had to, you know, like go to this shelf and then pick the 5th book along and use that to start making our poems. But again, it's all about demystifying what a library is, because these drawings that they do for me in their inductions, they really think us librarians are mean. I like to take the library on tour, get them a little trolley, off we go across the other side of campus. I've brought a selection of stuff to the studio for the assignment that we're working on today, which was a really interesting point that, you know, they were loving the books. And when I said, well, I've got my laptop, I can, you know, we can put this on loan on your account. Oh, no, I can't take the book. Why? Well, I'm just really anxious. Like, what if I lose it? What if like I forget to bring it back? Oh, no, I don't want to have responsibility for an actual object. Isn't that fascinating? Come with me to the library tours. This started again during the COVID times when my academics wanted me to make a video. So off I went with my selfie stick. But I've started to use these in more subject specific ways. So here I am in the bookshelves. Oh, look, I'm in the Vogue section. Hey, costume students, aren't these really cool? And I always do this in a really casual and informal, like vlogging style to make it relevant to the young people. And then a little bit different from the teaching, something we've started doing this year, actually, a really interesting project was I've not got the time for weeding. I really have struggled to keep on top of my collections, which is why the shelves are messy and chaotic. So our frontline staff who take care of shelving, as they've been spacing out the books in the library this year, I gave them some rules and some conditions, and they have been bringing things up to the subject office that some of them very clearly beyond repair, for us to make decisions. And again, this is an interesting point about when only print will do. We have actually been finding things where, you know, we still need this. I really don't want to throw this in the bin. So I've been upskilling myself with copy decks and tape. And yeah, real book conservationists would probably be very distressed by some of the ways I have actually been repairing books, but we've just got to make do. And along similar lines, we had some NSS feedback that our copies of British Vogue were in a terrible state, and our fashion students were actually very upset by our lack of care for them. So this kind of gave us a business case to find some money and actually send all of our copies of British Vogue away for binding. We did this a few years ago, and it has made such a difference because, you know, they're all really nice on the shelves now. It makes them much more accessible, and they continue to be used by students because they don't look like they're going to be really dirty and horrible and messy to use. And the final thing is that we have these rules for schools acquisitions processes. So again, you know, this streamlining and standardization of how we buy stuff. We've really tried to work for, you know, acknowledging this pedagogical difference for art and design, and thinking about ways that we can build flexibility into those standardized processes so that those disciplinary needs are met. So while some subjects, you know, it's a clear, we're just going to buy ebooks. I know I'm really grateful for my colleagues in our information resources department that they do give me the freedom to, you know, use my judgment to say this book really needs to just be a print. It'd be a waste of money to buy the ebook. And a big part of this is actually me advocating for my knowledge and my expertise as the subject librarian. My academics, they trust me, I think, you know, they really trust my judgment, and I take book shopping very seriously. This is my camera roll when I've been in a bookshop and I've ended up in the art and design section, and then I come back and think, oh, we need this as a stock selection. This is really going to help enrich our collection. So I can see and I just wanted to now tie this all back up to those pedagogical principles that I talked about at the beginning. So I do think, you know, the importance of digital, you know, digital resources, instant, easy access, and making stuff available for students, it is important. But, you know, if I didn't have my print collections, I would really struggle to do my library teaching in the way that I need to, encouraging browsing, encouraging that, you know, discovery process that involves making mistakes, picking things up on an off chance. And yeah, being creative in the library in terms of the ways that we can promote those collections. And I still just need to think about, okay, how do we help them overcome that anxiety and that lack of skills that we might presume students have around what is, you know, for hundreds of thousands of, you know, hundreds of years, the print book has been such a foundation of the academic library. But I'd look at my students and I think, we need to really go back to basics on how to make the most of this resource to help you with your degree. So thank you. And I think we've got time for questions.